Hi, I'm Gail Zugerman, host of the podcast Growing Older with Gusto. Today's guest is Sky Bergman, Professor Emeritus of Photography and Video at Cal Poly at San Luis Obispo. Sky's third act, after a 30-year teaching career, includes hanging artwork in prestigious museum collections and having her commercial work appearing in the Smithsonian Magazine. Her most recent passions involve creating films and projects that inspire intergenerational connections, which emphasize the power of sharing stories, which I know that I love. Her first book that we talked about on an earlier podcast, Lives Well Lived, was followed by a successful PBS documentary. This led to her second book called Lives Well Lived Generations. This book takes the wisdom from the film and celebrates all of life's essences across generations. I've read her book. It's fascinating, and there's so much to talk about. So let's get started. So welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. And just to clarify, Lives Well Lived is actually the first film I ever did,
Oh,
and Lives Well Lived Generations is the first book that I've ever written. So
right.
it's a
Okay.
companion to the film.
Okay,
Yeah.
got it. Okay. Okay. So can you give our listeners a little bit of background on how you came up with Lives Well Lived? What prompted you to make the film and now the book and on and on? It's like your brand. I think it's your brand, Sky.
I think it has become my brand. Yeah. So, I was lucky enough to have an incredible role model of aging in my own family, which was my grandmother, who, I was looking at approaching 50 and I'm 58. So this was about 10 or 12 years ago when I was like looking at that half century mark and thinking, oh my goodness, what is the rest of my life going to look like? And anything I was seeing in the media were all the negative things about aging, like how to stay youthful, how to use anti-aging creams to stay youthful and get rid of your lines. And that's not what I wanted. I really wanted to have those positive role models of aging. And in my own life, I had my grandmother, who was an amazing role model, who didn't start working out at the gym until she was 80,
Wow.
proving that it was never too late to start something new, even going to the gym. And I think that one of the things that I was looking for was who else is out there like my grandmother. And so I spent 4 years interviewing 40 people that were 75 plus with a collective life experience of 3,000 years. And that just set me off in a completely different career path. I'd never done a film before. And here I became a filmmaker to get the word out, and created the Lives Will Live PBS doc. And I'm super excited because PBS just extended our contract for another 4 years. So that's
Congratulations. That's
all really
amazing.
great news. Yeah. Yeah.
Younger people would say awesome. Just a little bit about your takeaways from the people you did interview for the film.
There were three common elements. And let me just say, I'm not a social scientist. I am an artist. And I was doing this as a very personal project. So I wasn't looking at everyone over 75. I was really looking for the positive role models that I could find of aging. And, I think that the three main key takeaways were really that everyone in the film had an incredible sense of purpose. And it didn't really, that could change over time. I think that one of the things that we find is that when people, in quotes, retire from their day job, they don't know how to define themselves. And I think part of that is not
It's a
having that
loss of
sense of
identity,
purpose.
particularly
Exactly. That loss of identity at that
identity.
moment. I also see that lack of sense of purpose in some of my college students when they realize, oh my goodness, I'm in the wrong major. I don't know what I'm doing. And they
Right.
feel like they're not grounded. And I think we all need to have a sense of purpose, and that can change at different points in our lives. So I think that learning to be flexible about what our sense of purpose is and our drive is, and all the people in the film had something that they look forward to getting up to do every day, whether it was learning something new or giving back in some way. That was their sense of purpose. I think the other thing was having a good support system, and that could be family or friends. There's these studies that have come out recently that the Surgeon General has said that loneliness is actually far more damaging to our health than even smoking cigarettes. They were
I
looking
read
at like
that. I
how
read
long
or
our
and
lifespans are.
right.
Yeah.
And
And
also,
so
excuse me, but exercising is important, diet, but it's the social connections that are most important. That's what I've learned too.
absolutely,
Right.
with this. loneliness epidemic, I think, happening right now, it's super important to, remember that having friends and having a good support system, and friends take work. It's not easy. Friends are
Right.
not just going to come to you. You have to work to make that happen. And I think thirdly, and this is a little bit of a cliche, but there's a reason for it. People in the film really saw life as the glass is half full rather than half empty. And so it was a
Yeah.
lot about their positivity and their attitude. So a lot of times in our lives, we can't control the things that happen around us, but what we can control is our attitude about how we deal with those things, whether it's reflecting back on things that have happened or dealing with things in the moment. A lot of it has to deal with our attitude of how we can handle the things that are coming our way. And that is a lot about resilience and positivity.
And that comes up as themes in your book also, which I noticed. Perseverance,
Absolutely.
resilience, all that. And it is so true.
Mhm.
It is so true. The people that I've interviewed for the podcast that are examples of growing older in a positive, productive way are people who do see the glass as half full and not half empty. And it's important. And it's hard for people who aren't like that, I think, to change. So,
I think that's true. I think that if you're around more people, surround yourself with people that you want to be like. And when you're
yeah,
around people that have that positive energy, that helps you really come into that mindset. And, I will say that the tagline for the book, it's lives well lived generations, resilience, positivity, and purpose at every age. So the book is really meant to help you. And there's some ideas of how you can maybe be a little more, have a little more of a sense of purpose, positivity, and resilience at every age in the book, because I learned so much from all the people in the book. So, what are some things that you can do in your own life? But I think one of the key things is surround yourself with other people that are positive and like-minded. And it's amazing how that can help bring you up out of maybe some difficult times.
exactly, exactly. Your work also includes themes about a legacy, leaving a legacy of knowledge. We talked a little bit here about resilience and overcoming obstacles. Tell us more about leaving a legacy of knowledge. What does that mean, really?
Well, I think that when we reach a certain age, we want to be able to give back. We have learned a lot because we have lived a life and we have years of experience and wisdom. And it's nice to be able to feel like we can share that wisdom and knowledge with another generation so that it's not lost. And I think that's part of leaving a legacy, is paying it forward and giving back. I mean, for example, I'll tell you a little really quickly about the new film that I'm working on called The Primetime Band, which is about older adults coming back to music later in life. And they're part of a band that rehearses every Tuesday, and it's a big 75-person band. But many of those people are also part of something called the Music Van, which goes into classrooms and brings instruments. It's quite literally a van full of instruments. They go into third grade classrooms and introduce young people to instruments, many of whom would never have the opportunity to touch an instrument, and to see the joy and the excitement. And I think that is part of that, paying that wisdom and that experience forward, right? It's older people who come back to instruments later in life and then pay it forward to young people and open up and light somebody up around music that maybe would never have had that experience otherwise. So I think that's all part of that connection and part of what that legacy is. How do we leave that legacy? How do we leave our stories, impart our wisdom, excite younger people about things? How do we do that? And there's so many creative ways to make that happen.
That's yeah, and your book really goes into that in detail. There's so many wonderful vignettes from people that, Sky, you've met and interviewed on what they're doing. The one that struck me was the one about the cycling. They went into the nursing home and they took the people out, and then they found out that when they came back, they everything was better. If they had dementia, they were clearer and their health was better. It was totally amazing. Totally. It was
Absolutely. And during that time, the people that, so this is called Cycling Without Age, and it started in Denmark. It's a wonderful, wonderful program. It's spread throughout the world now, but it's basically a bicycle, and then there's two seats in the front. So the older people that maybe can't ride a bike anymore have the experience of that wind in your hair and, that wonderful experience, but they're also engaged in a conversation with the person that's it's pedaling them. So they have this wonderful interchange of knowledge and wisdom in both directions, and they get this incredible experience that they wouldn't be able to have otherwise.
wonderful. That is incredible. So who do you see as the audience for your new book?
I think it's a number of different people, because I think the book is in some ways a guide, a self-help book in terms of people if they're looking for direction, they're looking for ways that they can have a sense of purpose and resilience and positivity. And I think it's also a book for people that want to be more involved in connecting generations or want to live a life with more purpose and more connection. And so I see it as a very broad book. It's not for a particular age group. I think young people can, gain as much knowledge from reading the book as somebody that's in their 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, even 90s. So I think it's a book for everyone that wants to maybe have a moment where they take a pause, reflect on their life, and look at what they want to do moving forward.
Wonderful. Okay, so I also found in the book one of the revelations through one of your interviews is that 4-year-old kids have already developed these cultural stereotypes. Now, tell me, how did that happen? And how does that?
Well, I think a lot, right, around ageism, and I think a lot of that has to do with the media. I mean, we're barraged by images, we're barraged by advertisements, and I think that even by the time somebody's 4 years old, they've already seen a lot of that, so they have this inherent bias. And I think it's up to us as individuals to change that. I think that it's like anything else, it's really easy to have a stereotype or an ism about a group of people if you don't know someone from that group. And so I think that's why, for me, connecting generations is so important, because I think it breaks down those barriers and those stereotypes of ageism in both directions. Let's face it, we talk more about ageism directed at older adults, but there's also ageism directed at young people. And so the more we can break down those barriers, we live in a very age segregated world. So the more that we can connect generations, the better off we will all be. And I think that those stereotypes that begin at the age of 4 will start disappearing.
Great. So let's talk about your 2 new films coming out. Let's first talk about Mochisuki. That
You
sounds
pronounce it right. That's great.
good.
So mochisuki quite literally means making mochi, and it's a Japanese tradition where to bring in the new year, they make mochi as a sign of hope and resilience and good luck for the new year. So mochi, if you've never had mochi, mochi is simply rice that's steamed and then pounded into a consistency that's kind of like a bread dough consistency. So very smooth. You don't see any of the grains of the rice. And then it's formed into mochi balls, and you can eat them just raw like that.
Yeah.
Or sometimes they well, for the new year, they put it in a soup called ozoni, which is lovely. But one of the things that I love about the mochisuki ceremony is that generations come together for the common good of making this food to bring in the new year, for good luck for the new year. And I think because I
Wow.
grew up in my grandmother's kitchen, I love this idea of generations coming together around food. And I think everyone that's listening right now can probably think of something that they did in their life where generations came together for a purpose around food. And for me, it was making pasta. And like if you're Italian, you know that we have on Christmas the 7 seafood fishes that you have to eat. There's everyone
Right.
has
Every
something.
religion is right. I
Yes.
remember making matzo balls or matzo ball soup.
Exactly.
Well,
So, I think that although it's about this particular Japanese American tradition, well, it's now been passed on, and Japanese Americans do this as well. It's just more about tradition around food and generations coming together. In particular, I like it because I always say the more personal, the more universal the message becomes. And for me, I got interested in it because one of the people in the Lives Will Live film, Susie Edo Bauman, her family did the mochisuki and invited me to come. And
wow.
so I saw it and I was just hooked. I mean, it's just like amazingly beautiful. And then my brother is also married to a Japanese woman and has 2 kids. And so I have 2 Japanese American nephews, and it's a way for me to understand a little bit more of their culture. So a very
That's a
personal
great bonding
story.
experience, right?
Yeah, yeah. So I have loved working on that film. And the other one, as I mentioned, is the Primetime Band. And
Right.
I was a band geek when I was a kid. I played flute, clarinet, and bassoon.
Whoa.
And I still play guitar and flute. And I just love this idea of people picking up a passion that they put away for many years and it really hits upon everything that I have talked about in the Lives Will Live film and the book, which is this sense of purpose. So all these people come together to make music. When you're in a band like that, you are one of many that come together. I think that also speaks to community. They rehearse every Tuesday night. They know if somebody's sick, they send get well cards and food, and so there's this sense of wonderful bonding and community. And then resilience and positivity. There are people in the band that maybe have Parkinson's, that it's not easy for them to play, but they still continue to go. It's really good for them. And then there's one woman in particular who plays the flute. She can't hold it horizontally anymore because she had an injury to her shoulder. She found a way to have it so that her headstock goes down instead of out, so she can hold it vertically and still continue to play the flute. So I
Wow.
love the resilience that comes into
With
play
a capital R.
for the
Wow.
people in the band. Yeah, yeah. And then, like I mentioned, I love the music van part of it where they go into third grade classrooms. It's such
Oh
a
my,
wonderful moment to be able to share that and just see the joy on the kids' faces and the older adults. When you give back, there is a sense of joy that you're giving back, and it's
my.
just palpable. It was just such a wonderful experience.
Oh, wow. So, Sky, you do all these things and you're so fluent on everything and you keep going. And this third act and whatever, it's incredibly inspiring to not only me, but to our audience. What is your personal definition of a life well lived?
That is a very good question, and thank you for turning the tables on me, because this is usually what I ask people. I would say that my definition of a life well lived is to be kind. I take that from my grandmother, who was always just kind to everyone, and it could be just a kind word or a kind act, but it's, when in doubt, always be kind, and that to me is a life well lived.
Very nice. Very nice. I wanted to read a quote from your book that really moved me and caught my attention, and I will read it. A candle doesn't diminish its radiance when it ignites another candle, quote. So tell us, how does this weave into your philosophies on aging well and growing older? It just struck me as I read your book. It was, wow, that's so powerful.
Well, I think that one of the things that I have always lived my life doing is giving back and giving to other people, and knowing that it might not, it's a sense of gratitude and paying it forward. And I think, a candle loses nothing by lighting another candle. We both burn much brighter as a result. And I think that we can lift each other up. And that's part of this, the aging process is also giving back and lighting another candle, lighting the next generation up, like the music van does with these young kids. You just literally see that. And I think the literal, like, passing of the torch, I think, is something really beautiful metaphor for me anyway, to think about lighting another
Did
candle
you see
and both burning brightly.
the Olympics in Paris with the torch,
Yeah.
Tuileries Gardens? Wasn't that
Yeah.
wonderful? I love that. That was
It was beautiful.
really,
There's a reason that they pass the torch, right?
yeah, exactly, exactly. And I love that you see the man at the end, 102, I think, in the wheelchair. That was
Yeah.
really amazing. This is your third act, and I don't want to say fourth act, but what's next for Sky Bergman?
Well, as I mentioned, I think that anything that I do is going to have an intergenerational component to it. So something, whether it's film or books or whatever I work on, will have that twist. I see that I really enjoy doing the filmmaking, so I am thinking that I'm going to continue on with the filmmaking, and that's just become a real love of mine. So it's nice to be able to weave all the things that I really enjoy doing, like music, storytelling, visuals, and this intergenerational component, to
Oh,
be a wonderful filmmaker. And that's, I think, what's next for me.
sounds wonderful. And so, if people want to reach you or get your book or see your films, can you tell our listeners a little bit about where they can do this?
Absolutely. The easiest place is to go to my main website, which is Sky Bergman Productions, and that's SkyBergman Productions.com. And there's links to everything that I'm working on: the book, the Lives Will Live film, with all the links to Amazon, iTunes, PBS, ways to watch the film, and all the other filmmaking projects that I'm doing right now. So that's the best way. And you can reach out. My email's there as well.
Fantastic. So it's really been nice talking to you, Sky. It always is. I've always enjoyed your books, and I will definitely look out for your films. And I think your film will be in the Santa Barbara Theater or something. You start out there. Tell us a little bit.
Well, the Lives Will Live started out in the Santa Barbara International Film Festival a number of years ago, and I'm hoping that Primetime Band film will also start out in the Santa Barbara International Film Festival in February of 2025. And the Mochizuki film is going to be on PBS in May of 2025 for Asian American Pacific Islander Month.
Wow, very good, very good. I'm going to try to get out to Santa Barbara and see it when it comes out. So for the listeners out there, thank you for listening. You can find our podcast, Growing Older with Gusto, on any podcast platform. And remember to stay curious and stay connected.